Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo are back after missing a number of games due to injury. The duo returns to the court on Monday night, just in time to take on one of the best teams in the NBA, the Minnesota Timberwolves. How will Eric Spoelstra handle his rotation? What can you expect from Herro and Adebayo versus the Wolves? We'll break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg. Joining me, as always, is David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. And if you've already made us your first listen this Monday morning, and you're listening to this one again, and maybe you're a little confused, but I just listened to these guys. This is a bonus episode. We're recording this a few hours before the Timberwolves game tonight because we have big news. Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo have been made available, clearing their way to make their Miami Heat return after extended absences for both of them. Tyler Herro has missed 18 straight games with a right ankle sprain that he suffered on November 8th in Memphis. And then Adebayo will return after 7 straight missed games due to a left hip contusion that's been basically bothering him all season. They put him on the shelf. Hey, just get better. It appears that he is better. It appears that Tyler Herro is better. And now, David, I guess what I'm about to say could maybe even be debatable, but the Heat have 2 starters returning when it feels like they really need them.
It's a huge game on Monday night, and they could certainly use the boost that Tyler and Bam will provide. They've got a huge front court there with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, and of course, Bam Adebayo matches up well with them. That's a question mark that has a trickle-down effect. But I mean, I think even going beyond all that, like, do you expect that Tyler and Bam will both be immediately put into the starting lineup? I know with Tyler's case, it's a little bit different because coincidentally, just as we talked, I think a few episodes ago about the potential return of Tyler Herro and how that might conflict with Duncan Robinson's emergence this season, Kyle Lowry missing the game due to general overall soreness, the fact that he's older, the fact that he's played a lot of minutes for this
maintenance
team.
loss. Yeah. Just
That's
schedule this again. We were talking, didn't we say that if we had any quarter mark recommendations for Kyle Lowry, it was let's find some vacation time. Let's get some business time off, some PTO. That's what today is.
Basically, absolutely. So Tyler, I would expect to start, and I think
they've
he'll
got
start
Josh Richardson. They got Josh Richardson coming back. They could always start him with Duncan and then bring Tyler off the bench. I don't know. I don't know with these ankles. Sometimes you want to just, okay, maybe 20 minutes tonight. Let's not put too much pressure on it, even though you've been out for more than a month. I don't know. It kind of depends on what the medical staff says and all these things. And of course, we're going to get zero of that information from Eric Spoelstra between now and the end of the game. But no, I think there is a potential for Tyler Herro to start with Duncan Robinson, depending again on how everything plays out and what the medical staff deems appropriate and all these things. Yeah. The Bam. Do we want to start with Tyler Herro or do we want to start with Bam? Because both, there's big questions happening with both. Maybe the Bam thing is a little bit cleaner. But
yeah, I think so. I think let's start with Bam because you know, the thing is the hip injury. While it's taken him out a number of games, I think it was mostly precautionary. Like at no point in time did he seem hobbled or limited by that. Even when he was playing, and then the very next game he was out with this mysterious injury, and he's missed a number of games since then. So I don't think it was just basically let's make sure this hip bruise, is completely clear.
Yes.
And it's no longer going to be a problem. He's going to get hip checked at some point. Rudy Gobert at 7'5" is just basically just angling at the right height to basically hip check Bam Adebayo back into the injury list. So it's a matter of just kind of, I think, preserving him and making sure that when he gets back out there and he does incur these game-to-game type injuries, he won't miss a prolonged amount of time.
Right. It felt like it was just a lingering injury that was bothering him. But you, like, to your point, you couldn't really tell as the viewer that it was bothering him, but it was bothering him. He was playing through it. April, May, June, he probably just plays through that thing. But in November and December, Miami made the right decision. Bam made the right decision. All right, let's just get this thing right. So I'm not worrying about it when these games really, really matter, and maybe even in a playoff setting. So hopefully, yeah, they've benched him now for 7 straight games, put him on the shelf. Hey, just get better. And now he's coming back against, it is sort of ironic. It's like, hey, welcome back. Here's 3 7-footers, right? Between Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, and Naz Reid. Like, have fun with that.
Right.
But that's all right. Here's how important Bam's return is, though. Okay. The Heat had the league's 10th ranked defense before Bam's extended absence. Since then, in the last 7 games, they've ranked 21st in the NBA
Nice.
in that span. Miami's defensive rating before 111.8 per 100 possessions. That was with Bam. And then since he was put on the shelf, that defensive rating has dropped to 120 over the last 7 games. That's worse, David, than the Warriors, who can't even figure out what their lineups are because they're struggling so bad, the Bucks, who can't get out of their own way on defense, and the Bulls, who are the Bulls. Like, that's how bad Miami's defense has been without Bam. And they've had moments of being okay, but overall they've been bad. And I know a lot of people, I get asked this all the time, like even just, off the show, not even talking about people like on Twitter and stuff, like, what's up with
Yeah.
Miami's defense? And I was like, Bam. Like, Bam's the problem. If he's not there, he is everything. He is the center of Miami's defensive universe. And when he's not on the court, like, no disrespect to Orlando Robinson, Thomas Bryant, Kevin Love, those other guys, but they're just not Bam Adebayo. And Bam was laying a defensive player of the year case again before the injury. And then he was out. And I said this before, like, add all the games that he was out to Bam's defensive player of the year
whole
reel.
season.
They prove it just as well. So
the whole season has been either an indicator when he's in how good he is, and when he's out of how desperate they need him, and why Miami's defense can still thrive because of him. So that's an excellent point, and I hope that voters take that into consideration. And I hope they don't use these missed games against him as they did just a few seasons ago.
Well, that's what's
but
key.
yeah,
it's only 10 absences through the first 26 games,
right.
So he could still miss 7 games and be eligible for some of these end of season awards.
I'm hoping. Look, it's his first game back. He doesn't miss time a lot over the course of his career. He's had a few minor injuries here and there. I hope that he comes in there
2 years ago. That was really it, right?
Yeah. So I'm looking for him to have a little. He'll have some nerves, kind of working his way back into game speed. He should be refreshed. He won't be tired. I don't think that'll be a problem. I don't think he'll be on a minutes restriction just because of the nature of this particular injury. And as we just said, that it wasn't really all that clear that he was limited by it. He was just hurt and experiencing pain. And so I imagine that he'll probably, I think he'll have a big game, to be honest with you. I know the matchup with Gobert is a tough one because he's such a great individual defender, Rudy is. But at the same time, Bam, I think, is a different version of the player that he has been in years past, where he would see that size and be intimidated by the length of Gobert and the rim protecting and the shot blocking ability. And I think he'll be much more fluid. I think he'll have a nice bounce back game tonight. My other question, though, when it comes to Bam,
can I jump on that really quick?
Yeah,
it's a good
go
point
for
you
it.
made. I don't want to talk so much about Monday, like just tonight's game, just because it's happening in a few hours. But
no doubt.
The Timberwolves game is an interesting matchup for Bam because they do obviously a great job of taking stuff away in the paint and at the rim because they're so big.
Yeah.
And scoring against them is going to be an adventure of just long limbs and muscle and swatting shots, and it's going to be tough, right? Minnesota's defense in the half court are allowing 88.1 points per 100 possessions in the half court. That's an impossibly low number.
Good.
That's insane. It's basically impossible to score on them in the half court. But because Bam and Jimmy Butler and Tyler Herro, by the way, all sort of thrive in that mid-range area, that's sort of what Minnesota allows. They do a good job of running opponents off the three-point line, funneling them towards their 7-footers at the basket. But instead of funneling all the way to the basket, if Bam just stops short and takes that jump shot from the foul line, that's going to be open. And then that's going to stress the Minnesota's strategy defensively. And if you get Bam doing that, if you've got Jimmy obviously doing that, and obviously Tyler doing that, I think the Heat could find some nooks and crannies in which to work against the Timberwolves defense. But anything else on Bam before we move to Tyler?
Well, no, I'm just also curious to see how well the partnership with this version of Duncan Robinson will play out too. I expect it would be without a hitch because they had that chemistry even before this new, better version of Duncan. The pick and rolls, his ability to kind of make those passes to one another. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that pairs out. As far as Bam too, also, does this give Eric Spoelstra an opportunity, or does it force his hand into starting Haywood Highsmith again? Because I don't know if Caleb Martin is the best matchup necessarily for Karl Anthony Towns. Well, he's not necessarily, your typical low post threat or as a center position or anything like that. I wonder whether or not you might need that kind of strength of Haywood's just to kind of keep him off balance a little bit, or would you still go with Caleb Martin as a starter?
It's interesting because Caleb played almost 37 minutes against Chicago on Saturday night. Haywood played 14 minutes off the bench, but he was coming back from his own injury from the lower back contusion. So it depends. Is he still on a little bit of a minutes restriction or not? And if he is, do you want to put him up? I mean, we're talking about Haywood being bigger than Caleb Martin. That's a low bar, right? Caleb Martin is more of a shooting guard than a power forward in terms of size.
Right.
He's still giving up a whole lot of size to Minnesota's front court. And by the way, when Minnesota goes with like Kyle Anderson and stuff, those guys are all bigger than Haywood Highsmith. So,
Yes.
I don't know. That might be a little tough. It just depends on the back. I do wonder if maybe Spo just says, let's go big with Kevin Love and Bam Adebayo in the front court. We've seen him go with that lineup this season, last year in the playoffs against the New York Knicks and things like against big teams like that. And then now you have Orlando Robinson coming off the bench maybe because Minnesota basically cycles through their 3 centers on the floor.
Yeah.
You got 1 or 2 of them on the floor at any given time. I don't know. Maybe does Miami try to trend big that way? It'll be interesting.
Naz Reid is a big threat looming here because I mean he's so mobile and he can shoot from distance so well that none of Miami's backup centers are an option. Either Love, Bryant, or Robinson are really equipped to deal with him. Love has his moments against the Chicago Bulls, mostly because Nikola Vucevic is as slow as he is, and he still looked great from the perimeter. So that's going to be a concern for Miami, absolutely.
Let's talk about Tyler Herro. Before sustaining the right ankle sprain in November 8th in Memphis, he had been Miami's leading scorer. He was posting career highs in points at 25.3, rebounds at 5.6, assists at 5 per game, and steals at 1.4. Those were just through the first 7 games of the season, but man, he looked good. He looked great. He was obviously starting at shooting guard to open the season. He's been replaced in the lineup by Duncan Robinson. Now, Robinson as a starter is averaging 16.4 points on 48.6% shooting overall, 46.2% on threes, 3.6 assists. The Heat are 11-5 with Duncan as the starter. So we do have that conversation about whether or not you bring Tyler Herro off the bench or if you continue to start Tyler Herro and move Duncan Robinson back to the bench. Again, tonight, it's a little bit complicated because Kyle Lowry is out. We could do the starting conversation. We did just kind of do this last week a little bit, but let's do just the Tyler Herro in a vacuum first. Do you think that we see more of what we saw before the injury in terms of Tyler Herro coming back?
I don't know. It's a huge question, and I wonder. I think we're going to get a more nuanced version of Tyler overall. I think Monday might not be as fluid for him as I expect it to be for Bam. And listen, I'll be the first to admit that I am really guessing here. Just the nature of Tyler's injury and the fact that he was so hindered by it. Like, I mean, you need that base in order to get those shots off, to be able to plant and drive past an opponent, etc. So for Tyler, more so than for Bam, I expect him to be a little bit more shaky. And I think also just because the naysayers have gotten so loud over the offseason and even over the start of this season, I wonder if he'll try to force it a little bit. And yet, when you blend that with the fact that the coaching staff has loved what they've gotten out of Duncan Robinson and expect some differences in Tyler's game, I'm curious to see how he'll respond. I want to see a different version, a slightly different version of Tyler that incorporates more of the off-ball movement, more of the off-ball scoring opportunities and things like that, and then incorporate that with, I'm a bucket getter and this is what I do. And all of this, expecting him to balance this very precariously as he comes back from injury. It's not an easy situation for Tyler. So I completely empathize on what might be a tough night for him.
We really haven't seen Tyler Herro play with a full-strength Miami Heat roster this year. And so people will look at what the record was before Tyler Herro got hurt and after and say, well, that's why you got to start Duncan Robinson, because the Heat just play better. And they kind of also tie that into last year when the Heat made their big playoff run with Max Strus, replacing Tyler Herro, who had broken his hand in the first game of the playoffs. But what we never saw this year, we've never seen it this season, is a Jimmy Butler at full strength, because we all remember how slow he started the season because he didn't play in the preseason. So he's rusty to start the season. Haywood Highsmith had not yet become the starter when Tyler Herro was healthy, right? And we all remember how that sort of unlocked Miami's lineup, bring Kevin Love, take him from the starting unit, bring him off the bench. What Kevin Love and Jimmy Butler have accomplished in that second unit has been enormous for sustaining offense throughout these games for the Heat. So we haven't really seen like full strength, hey, we kind of figured it out, Miami Heat, with the version of Tyler Herro that we saw before, who was efficient, who was not just scoring a bunch on his own, but elevating Miami's offense. Miami outscored opponents with Tyler Herro on the court versus when Tyler Herro was off the court, that offense struggled. And so we saw like the winning plays. We saw the steals, the big defensive plays that he was making, the defensive, like the team defense improvement that he was making. Like he was just a flatly better player. That two-man game between Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo was really developing in a meaningful way. And it was something that I was sort of tracking right before he was injured. I think that I think the Tyler Herro we saw the first 7 games is more of the Tyler Herro we're going to see once he's up and running to full strength and knocks off all the rust and whatever it might be. And we're going to get that now with a midseason form Jimmy Butler and potentially a starting lineup that's a little bit more settled, because I think you and I agree on this. We don't anticipate Caleb Martin being the full-time starter at power forward once everybody's healthy and perhaps when it's just even Haywood Highsmith getting healthy. So we'll see. The one thing I am monitoring, and it's a number that I brought up before Tyler Herro was hurt and a little bit after, and when we have these Duncan Robinson versus Tyler Herro in the starting lineup conversations, average seconds per touch. Tyler Herro is averaging 4.04 seconds per touch, which is a hair below Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is averaging 4.38 seconds per touch. Now, those aren't superstar numbers, right? Like the highest usage players in the league are averaging closer to 6, 7, 8 seconds per touch. But those are the highest on the Heat. Jimmy and Tyler at over 4 seconds per touch. You compare that to Duncan Robinson, who averages 2.11 seconds per touch. So basically half of the amount of time that Tyler Herro holds the ball, Duncan Robinson holds the ball. I think there is something to be said about, hey, when you're playing with Jimmy and Bam, be a little bit more like Duncan Robinson in terms of not holding the ball and playing with it as much. But at the same time, if he's going to be the anchor of the second unit, that's the time where Tyler Herro gets to cook and hold the ball, because quite frankly, when he's with the second unit guys, you want the ball in his hands more than Josh Richardson and those other guys. So it'll be interesting to see, okay, how does he balance playing alongside Jimmy and maybe taking on a more of a, like you said, David, a nuanced role, something where he is maybe a little bit more off ball, catch and shoot, get the ball, get rid of it quickly. I'd like to see a little bit more of that when playing with Jimmy, but I also think that it's on Jimmy a little bit to force that.
No doubt. I think part of it also is not just the fact that he holds the ball a little too long. I want him to make quicker decisions, and it's also not as efficient because he just doesn't generate as much points per touch. You know, like with Jimmy, however long he's holding the ball, maybe it's not great offense per se, but he can get to the line at a much higher rate than Tyler can. So that's going to be a difference. As far as that bench unit, you know, something that we're not considering here, Jaime Jaquez, like, is his role altered by the let Tyler cook lineups? That's something else to look out for. It's going to be interesting. Look, I mean, they're going to go through some growing pains all the way around, but I don't think that takes away from the overall excitement that Heat Nation should feel about the return of their 2 starters, because they're great players. And I mean, even if they struggle on Monday night, over the long haul, this is nothing but beneficial for Miami to continue their push.
These are like champagne problems, right? Like what we're talking about with Tyler Herro coming back. You know, it's like, oh man, now we have like 2 good shooting guards that we have to figure out where. Oh, and now the surprising rookie might have to touch the ball a little bit less. Which, by the way, I think is fine in terms of the Jaime thing. I actually think he should be touching the ball a little bit less, because you don't want to get him even closer to the rookie wall, which is going to happen. He's going to struggle this season. I'm just like, it's just going to happen. Every player goes through struggles this season, even the great Jaime Jaquez Jr. It's going to happen. But these are good problems for Miami to figure out and to solve. They need Tyler Herro. This offense.
Well, Eric Spoelstra say that in the pregame press conference. These are good problems to have.
For sure. That did sound a little spoey from me. That was a little bit of a spoism. We got 2 all-world scorers, and they're coming back, just world-class competitors. And you want to have these kinds of problems, both of them extremely ignitable at any given night.
Extremely.
So that's what we'll get a whole lot of that stuff. We'll see what happens.
Forward to it. It should be an awesome.
Yeah, the Heat need Tyler Herro back. The offense has at times really struggled, especially lately. When you have him as an option, and it's gonna look. It's not. You're going against the #1 defense in the league right now in Minnesota, so you can't judge a whole lot off of this. But I will be looking at some of the rotations, the lineup stuff, the minutes that are allocated, and just some of the process stuff that's around Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, and the whole group. But I think you and I agree on this, David. The fact that the Heat are 15-11 right now, given the injuries and the road heavy schedule, that to start the season and everything, I think is a good thing. And if this team
Absolutely.
can get healthy, then I think they have only their best basketball ahead of them, which is pretty exciting based on what we've seen so far this year. All right,
Absolutely.
that'll do it for us
Look
today.
forward
Thanks
to
for
it.
making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you tune in tonight, Monday night. We will have our recap from Kaseya Center, post-game takeaways, hopefully giving out some credit cookies. We'll take your listener questions as well. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day.